Welcome into Back the Net. It is Friday night. I am here, as always, your host, Nick Burt. And since it's Friday night, that means it's time for a weekend preview. Got a lot of, it's all European football this weekend. There's nothing tremendously going on anywhere else that I feel needs mentioning, but I mean, we're still here for it. So we'll do our four normal leagues, go through all of them. Three of them, of course, kicked off earlier today on Friday. And then, of course, the one that didn't gets their full breakdown, but still, we'll still mention the games that happened today. So let's just get into it. Let's get into what is coming up in this, match week 3 for two of the leagues, match week 2 for the other two leagues. But match week 3 of the Premier League kicked off this evening in England, this afternoon here in the U.S. Chelsea take a 3-0 victory at home at Stamford Bridge against Luton Town. Raheem Sterling with a brace. It was something watching Chelsea play 5 at the back against Luton Town, who in their 3 games played still very much look like the worst team the Premier League may have ever seen. That did not mean to click off there, but it did. They very much look like one of the worst teams that the Premier League has ever seen. They just don't have anything really of substantial benefit. We'll of course see next week when they play. I think they play on Friday once again. This time at home against West Ham United, their first game at Kenilworth Road in the Premier League era. It's going to be interesting to see if they can get points off of West Ham with a home crowd. I don't think it's going to happen just because I don't think they have the talent there to even take advantage of that. So we're going to see how that plays out. We have no reason to look ahead here. They looked very poor today. Chelsea still played 5 at the back, looked awful again, but still got a 3-0 victory, their first win on the season, so that is quite important for them. Moving on to Saturday, the early kickoff is back this week, the 7:30 a.m. kickoff here in the U.S., the 12:30 kickoff in England. Tottenham traveled down to the South Coast to face off against Bournemouth. This is gonna be another tricky challenge for Ange Postecoglou with his system. It's just another game for them to develop. For Bournemouth, it's sounding like both Alex Scott and Tyler Adams are fit to play, so we'll most likely see both of them making a debut tomorrow. This should theoretically be a somewhat easy win for Tottenham, especially with the way they played against Manchester United. But it's Tottenham, so this would be a game that they lose. Last season, Tottenham won 2-0 at the Vitality Stadium, which is Bournemouth's home stadium. And then they lost 3-2 in April at home off of 2 goals in stoppage time, which was just absolutely awful. But a lot of both of the teams have changed a lot since then, so I'm not expecting that. Like I said, I expect Tottenham to win this game because this is a game they should win. This isn't the same as the Brentford game where a draw will feel good. A draw will kind of feel like a loss, but I feel like Tottenham need to get a full 3 points here because Bournemouth, they're a good side. They're not great. They'd probably be in the bottom if there weren't worse teams in the league this year, which just shows how poor the league is this year. So, like I said, I expect Tottenham to pull out the victory here. Moving on to their North London neighbors, Arsenal, hosting Fulham on the 10 o'clock kickoff, which is the 3 p.m. or the 10 a.m. kickoff for a 3 p.m. kickoff in England. That's the start of first of the 4 games during that time frame. I'm not expecting a ton from Fulham here. They really haven't shown me a lot in the first 2 weeks of the season, so I'm not really expecting a lot more from them here. So I'm expecting Arsenal to come out with a victory. Brentford, Crystal Palace. After Brentford's massive showing last week against Fulham with a 4-0 victory at the Craven Cottage, I'm kind of interested to see how this game's going to turn out for them, because Crystal Palace, somewhat a similar side to Fulham. They're not the exact same, but they are, I think, a little bit similar in their, tactical mindsets and, squad quality, I guess I would say. So it's going to be interesting to see if Bournemouth can replicate, Brentford can capitalize on that performance from last week in what should be an interesting London derby. Everton face off against Wolves, two of the worst teams in the league this year. This is Everton's first real shot at getting points this year, and if they don't get points, it's already gonna start looking really bad, because Wolves are also quite awful. And this is already a crucial game in the relegation race, because it's match week 3. We shouldn't even be discussing relegation race right now, but these two teams are going to need all the points that they can get this year if they want to stay up. So this is going to be an absolutely crucial game for both sides. Manchester United, coming off that 2-0 loss at Tottenham, host Nottingham Forest. Forest haven't had the greatest of starts, but they haven't had the worst of starts. I'd argue Manchester United have had the worst start. Yes, they got a win already against Wolves. It was a game that they did not deserve to win. And then they just didn't show up against Tottenham. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of performance Erik ten Hag gets his team up for. But it's also going to be interesting to see what Steve Cooper and those tricky trees can bring to Old Trafford on Saturday morning / afternoon. And then in the 12:30 game, we have Brighton Hove Albion, their great start of the season, 2 4-1 victories. Face off against West Ham United at home. This is going to be their first real test facing a team that isn't a relegation side. West Ham coming off that big 3-1 victory against Chelsea last weekend. Both sides, I feel like, have something to prove. Like, West Ham got to prove that the Chelsea game wasn't just a fluke. Brighton have to prove that, they're not like just merchants against bad teams, because so far that's all they've played. They've played I believe the two worst teams in the league, Luton Town and Wolverhampton Wanderers, even though Everton do have a shout of being one of the worst teams in the league. It's still going to be interesting to see how this game plays out. I think Brighton Hove Albion get this done again. It's not going to be a 4-1 victory, I can tell you that. It's going to be something like 2-1. But it should make for a fascinating matchup, hopefully in the 12:30 window. Moving on to Sunday, we have 2 9 a.m. kickoffs and an 11:30 kickoff, which means that we don't have a game on Monday. That's partially because Carabao Cup second round action takes place on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I believe. That sounds about right. Because then the draw is on Thursday for the third round. Yes, that is correct. So first, we have Burnley at home at Turf Moor facing off against Aston Villa. Aston Villa got a 5-0 win against Hibernian, I believe it is, the Scottish Premiership team in their Europa Conference League qualifying matchup on Wednesday. Obviously, Europa nights are usually Thursday, so for them playing on a Saturday or Wednesday and then playing on a Sunday, that's a little bit more extra time than what they would usually get. So that's probably going to help them. I'm not 100% sure, but that probably does help them there. I think Aston Villa will win this game. I still think they got a lot to prove this season, and going up a team like Burnley could set up for a very important game for both sides. Like I said, I think Burnley are the best of the three teams that got promoted this year. So this could be a time for Vincent Kompany to make his big Premier League debut, technically, even though it's week 3. That first real winning feeling, I guess, of the style that he's brought to Burnley that won him the championship last year. This could be that breakout moment. Sheffield United at home against Manchester City. I'm expecting at least 2 goals from Erling Haaland probably, and Manchester United winning this game 5-0. Then finally, in the 11:30 game, a very interesting game. 2 teams that are hoping to be competing for top 4 spots at the end of the season. It is Newcastle United, it is Liverpool. Probably the biggest matchup for both sides in this early on in the season. Obviously, Liverpool faced off against Chelsea, but this really does feel like that first big game for both sides. Kind of get a feel of where you're at in the league. So it's going to be interesting with that Newcastle United home crowd, what they can do to use that to their advantage, because they very much used it to their advantage on the opening weekend against Aston Villa. We saw how that played out. That was a 5-1 victory for Newcastle United. So that is your Premier League weekend preview. So we'll move on to La Liga. We had 2 games today. Las Palmas and Real Sociedad had a 0-0 draw, and Real Madrid come away with a 1-0 victory on the road against Celta Vigo. Jude Bellingham, an absolutely outstanding performance. His 3rd outstanding performance in 3 games for Los Blancos, Real Madrid. It's looking like an absolutely steal of a signing for Real Madrid, getting him from Borussia Dortmund. I'm excited to see how he develops. Obviously, he is one of the future stars of this England national team squad, which are getting ready to play games in a few weeks. That would be 3 weeks from now, I believe. 3 weeks sounds about right. Actually, might be 2 weeks, because I think next week is the last week before the international break, so that's 2 weeks right there. So I think it's somewhere around there. But like I said, Real Madrid looks like they have an absolutely steal of a signing with getting Jude Bellingham over the summer and getting the deal done early so it didn't drag out all summer. He had all summer to develop within the camp there at the Bernabeu, and I'm excited to see where this goes for him. So on Saturday, you have Cádiz against Almeria. You have Granada against Mallorca. And then you have Sevilla against Granollers. I think the biggest game here probably is going to be that Sevilla-Granollers game. Granora. So it's one of those tough ones to announce. It's, difficult sometimes. They got a 3-0 victory at home against Getafe last weekend. Sevilla coming off a 4-3 loss to Deportivo Alvarez. So it's going to be interesting to see how Sevilla bounce back from that. This theoretically should be a game they win, but who knows what's going to happen. La Liga seems to be a little bit crazy this year. Sunday, we have Villarreal facing off against Barcelona. Valencia facing off against Osasuna. And then we have Bilbao against Real Betis. I really like all 3 of these games. I think all 3 of them have the potential to be quite good. Villarreal at home against Barcelona, that should be an outstanding game. I like both sides there, which means I like the draw, basically. Valencia and Osasuna. Valencia have been in a downfall the past few years. They got a win last weekend against Las Palmas at home. I'm expecting the Mestalla Stadium to be bouncing once again as they host Osasuna. and I'm not really sure what to expect from that game. I would say I'd expect Villarreal to come away with the win, or not Villarreal, Valencia to come away with the win. But they just, like I said, they've been very inconsistent these past few years that I wouldn't expect anything less from them to lose this game. And then we have Bilbao against Betis. It should be an interesting game. Betis coming off a 0-0 draw against Atletico Madrid. Bilbao coming off a 2-0 win against Osasuna. They were on the road for that one. Betis was at home against Atletico Madrid. So now the roles are flipped as Bilbao are at home and Betis are on the road. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a 0-0 draw. This just kind of has the feeling of that. And then on Monday, Getafe face off against Deportivo Alvarez, and Rayo Vallecano face off against Atletico Madrid. Both Deportivo Alvarez and Rayo Vallecano both playing on Mondays 2 weeks in a row. They were just like Bilbao and Real Betis. They are flipped this week. Deportivo were at home last week. They're on the road this week. Vallecano were on the road last week, at home this week. I thought Deportivo were going to be quite a bad squad this year. Then getting a 4-3 win against Sevilla kind of changes that opinion a little bit. They might be a mid-table squad now. But, Getafe, they got a 0-0 draw against Barcelona match week 1. They lose 3-0 match week 2. I don't really know what to expect from them. So therefore, I think it's just best to guess that Deportivo are going to come away with a win here, but I'm not really sure what to expect, like I said. But then the other game, I really do expect Atletico Madrid to put up at least 3, maybe minimum 2, at most 3, or at most more than 3, I should say. But I expect them to come away with a easy win here. So given that is your La Liga weekend preview, and now we will move on to the next, league that we always talk about here. We go Premier League, La Liga, which means we are moving on to the Bundesliga, which started out with a bang this afternoon/evening in Germany, of course. RB Leipzig take a 5-1 victory against Stuttgart. Last week we were talking about how Stuttgart were top of the table. They had a 5-0 win. We were talking about how RB Leipzig lost 3-2 to Bayer Leverkusen. You couldn't overreact at the time because, it was match week 1. I feel like both teams have now been brought back down to their normal levels. Stuttgart just basically lose almost all of that goal differential. And RB Leipzig are now near the top of the table, even though they are the only 2 teams that have played 2 games. So it is way too early to be talking about tables, but here I am still talking about tables. Moving on to Saturday, Bochum at home against Bayern, I almost said Bayern Munich right there. It is Borussia Dortmund. Bochum are the ones that were on the other side of that 5-0 victory for Stuttgart. I'm expecting them to lose quite heavily here once again. Dortmund are just by far the better squad. Darmstadt are at home facing off against Union Berlin. I'm expecting Berlin to pull off the victory here once again. Heidenheim at home for their first Bundesliga game of all time. This was a squad that was in the 6th tier of German football, I believe 20-ish years ago, somewhere around there. And here they are at the top of the German pyramid, facing off against Hoffenheim. I think it's still going to be a struggle for Heidenheim here. The best they can do probably here is a draw, but I do think it's going to be Hoffenheim that wins this game. Köln at home against Wolfsburg. Two teams that I think are going to be competing for European spots near the end of the year, but could be completely wrong there. Given that it's at home, I like Köln here. Freiburg at Werder Bremen. I don't know. These teams both seem to be going in opposite directions. Freiburg going up and Werder Bremen going down. So I do like Freiburg to win this game here. Mönchengladbach against Bayer Leverkusen. Bayer Leverkusen got that big win against RB Leipzig last weekend. Mönchengladbach got a draw against Augsburg, I believe it was. I expect Leverkusen to come in and win this game. Mainz against Eintracht Frankfurt. I like Frankfurt in this game. I just think they're the better squad. And then finally, the squad that is going to win this game by far, Bayern Munich against Augsburg. I don't see Augsburg putting up a fight. It's the first game for Bayern Munich in season at the Allianz Arena in Munich, so I'm expecting them to get a win there. So given that, we will move on from Germany, move to the final league we'll talk about, as always, usually. And it's, of course, the only one that has not started, and they rarely do Friday games, so we can, preview everything for them. So moving on to Serie A, it's going to be quite an interesting weekend over in Italy. We start off on Saturday as Friemonte Calico face off against Atalanta. I'm expecting Atalanta to get it done here. I'm not seeing a lot from Friemonte this year, even though it's match week 2. I'm still not expecting a lot. AS Monza at home, they face off against Empoli. This could be a interesting game to watch. I think both teams are going to be sitting mid-table near the end of the year, so therefore this game could be crucial points-wise. I like Monza here because it's a home game for them. It's their first home game since their owner died in July, so that's going to be quite an emotional event. And then you have the Italian Grand Prix in Monza next weekend. That has nothing to do with this game, but just felt like it needed to be mentioned because we're mentioning Monza. Hellas Verona face off against AS Roma. AS Roma, very disappointing match week 1 for them. Looking to bounce back here on the road against Hellas Verona. Should be an intriguing match to watch because of that storyline. I still think Roma are going to turn it around somehow and get a win here, but it's Roma, so they could lose. And then you have AC Milan against Torino. AC Milan, if Christian Pulisic can get another goal here in this game, I think that's really going to set the standard for him this year. Just starting to get into the feel of things, and then you start adding up those goals. You start, getting in a rhythm, basically. So, should be an interesting game to watch there. Sunday, you have Fiorentina facing off against Lecce. Fiorentina, they had a Europa Conference League qualifier on Thursday. They won that one quite handily also, so should be an easy-ish win for them at home on Sunday, but you never know how fatigue's going to play out there. You have Juventus facing off against Bologna. I'm expecting Juventus to win this game, probably by 2 goals around there. Lazio facing off against Genoa. Lazio, a very disappointing match week 1. So it's going to be interesting to see how they respond to that against Genoa. Another team that had a disappointing match week 1. So both sides looking for something to prove here. And then, of course, the Scudetto champion winners, Napoli face off against Sassuolo. Napoli in their first home game of the season should be quite interesting to watch. And I'm expecting them to get a win here. And then on Monday, you have Salernitana against Udinese Calico. Salernitana got that 2-2 draw against AS Roma last week. So now that they're at home against a team that lost 3-0, I believe it was, to Juventus in Udinese, I'm expecting Salernitana to get the win here, but you never know. And then Cagliari face off against Inter Milan in the final game of match week 2. What should be an interesting matchup to watch, even because Cagliari in their first Serie A game in 3 years, I believe it is. It might be 2 years. Claudio Ranieri as manager, going up against, of course, Italian giants Inter Milan, who got an easy win last week in match week 1. It would be quite a big upset if Cagliari can get the upset here. So given that was Italy for their match week 2, and that is going to be it for today. So we got through 4 leagues in right under 30 minutes. So hopefully you enjoyed that. You'll see a top of the perch Saturday night or Sunday night, one of the two, recapping Tottenham's game against Bournemouth. We will be back on Monday for another back of the net to recap all these matches that we just talked about. And hopefully you enjoyed this episode. If you stumble across it, like, subscribe, tell anybody you know about us. And we will be back here with this show on Monday, but there will be content throughout the weekend. So we will see you back here very soon.